Okay, on today's edition of Complaint Corner, we are replacing a wheel hub slash bearing assembly, driver's front of a 2003 Dodge Ram 1500 four-wheel drive. Once again, I've done most of the work partway into this just to save time and make for a shorter video. What you're going to need for this project is going to be a 13/16 socket, a 7/8 socket, a 36 millimeter socket for your axle nut, and be handy to have a ball joint separator. You can use a pry bar if you want, but it's a lot easier if you have the actual ball joint separator tool, which basically just looks like that. All right, and a couple of jack stands, at least one. Two is always a lot easier. All right, so you're gonna jack her up in the air, get your wheel off, get some jack stands in place, and after you have all that taken care of, what you want to do is take the nut off of the upper ball joint arm and take the lower bolt out of your shock to get that away from the lower control arm. And you're going to use your ball joint separator to separate this loose. Obviously, you've got to remove the two main bolts that hold your brake caliper assembly and rotor in place. Pull that off and either use some wire or string to suspend it, or get yourself a bucket or some other short stand where you can just set it off to the side out of the way so it's not putting any pressure on your brake line. Not good. All right, so after you have that taken care of, and go ahead and remove the nut from the upper control arm ball joint, remove the bolt, lower bolt from the shock, then you should be able to bring this out and have plenty of play. All right, on the four-wheel drive models, it's an extra pain in the butt because you've got to remove the CV axle to be able to get your hub assembly off of the steering knuckle. So you want to pull the nut off of the front of your axle, and if you cannot get it to break loose on its own or by tapping the end of this with a soft hammer, be careful if you use a hammer, make sure it's a soft hammer, you don't want to damage the threads here. If you can't get to that point, then you're going to have a 3-jaw puller. Set it up on the assembly, and you're basically going to drive the axle out of the splines on the hub assembly. Once that's done and you can completely lay this forward, there are 3 bolts from the backside that you can only access after you remove the axle, and you're going to need to remove those 3 bolts to be able to then take off the hub assembly, hub and bearing assembly, and the heat shield, and then you're ready to install the new one. And I will continue once we get to that point. Okay, the new assembly is now in place. I forgot to mention earlier, you're going to need an 18 millimeter socket to remove the 3 bolts that connect the assembly to the steering knuckle. Basically, once you have all that pulled off, it's just the reverse of what you did to disassemble for the assembly. You're going to get your heat shield back in place first, get your new assembly, put it in place, get your 3 bolts set up, tighten them a little bit at a time all the way around to make sure that your assembly seats smoothly and correctly, and then go ahead and tighten them the rest of the way down. Make sure everything is to torque specs. Once that is done, then you go ahead and put your axle nut on. The torque specs on that are 185 foot-pounds. I'm gonna reconnect the shock, reinstalling the lower bolt. Going to reconnect the upper control arm. Torque specs on this nut are 40 foot-pounds plus another 90 degree turn. After that, pretty much you're ready to put your brake assembly and rotor back in place, and it's just a matter of picking it up, setting it in there, putting these 2 bolts back in, and then you're ready to put your wheel back on and take her for a test drive. All right, I hope I didn't omit anything. If you have any questions, just send me a message, let me know. I'll be happy to help you in any way that I can. Thanks for watching.